I'm Jeff Gore. I'm in the Department of Physics, and what I thought would maybe be useful is to give kind of a very concrete manifestation of how I try to implement some of these active learning ideas in my classroom. Just because sometimes when I read booklets about these sorts of ideas, I get a sense that it sounds great, but I just don't know exactly what I'm being suggested to do. And it's not that I don't claim to have the right answer, but I think it is nice just to have something concrete. Right, so the course that I'm teaching right now, and I lectured this morning, or lectured, is a systems biology course, which broadly is trying to understand how structure or function arises at a higher level of organization from lower level parts. Doesn't really matter, but just so you have some sense of the composition of the class, it's a majority graduate student, but with a significant minority of undergraduates, spread from physics to biology, biological engineering, mathematics. So it's really quite a broad course in terms of background, and that's of course one of the challenges of teaching the class. But I think that's a little bit orthogonal to the question of active learning. And yeah, so from my standpoint, I would say that there are a few things that I very much like implementing in this class that help with the active learning in a variety of ways. So first, I do very much like having pre-class reading together with pre-class questions, and I'll tell you kind of how we do that. Also, I do like, this is not necessarily active learning, but I do like at the beginning of a lecture to just tell the students what they're supposed to be getting out of the lecture, like the three big ideas. And I think this is also good for research seminars, in my opinion. I find often I'm tempted to try to construct like a mystery novel in a class, where I'm going to guide the group through this complex chain of reasoning and then have a big reveal at the end. But I think that's a bad idea because nobody actually can follow what you tried to do. So I like to just be straightforward at the beginning, tell people what hopefully they're going to learn in the next hour. I also wanted to say a few things about how we do the concept questions in my class, which is that we use flashcards rather than the clickers that I think many of us use. And in many ways, I think I actually prefer the flashcards. And then I want to stress the importance of the peer instruction. All right, so very concretely, the syllabus has some pre-class reading, and what that means, and it's required in the sense that I ask them to fill out answers to 3 questions the night before. So basically, 10 o'clock the night before via Google Forms, they just click the link and they write their name, the answers to a few of these questions, and the idea is they're really supposed to be short answer questions. Right? So they just type in, and then I get it in the form of a spreadsheet, and then that night at say 10:30, I can go through the answers. I get a sense of how the students felt about the material, and also I can then send back what I view as being kind of strong responses that night. Right, so first, I think the students kind of appreciate it when their answer is chosen to go out to the class. But also, I think that the fact that I'm doing some work together with them makes them feel not quite as annoyed that I'm forcing them to do these pre-class questions. Right? And also, I always have an optional question at the end of each of these sessions, or each of these questions, which is basically, what did you find confusing or surprising about the reading or about the last lecture? Because I think that it's often the case that students have a question that they're not going to ask in the context of the class. But I think that here, they're clicking something, they're going to be sending me something anyway, so then it's just very easy for them to say something that they were confused by. And indeed, I'd say roughly 1 in 5 students takes advantage of this each session. And I just looked at some of the responses from the last session, and you can see some sense of the kinds of questions that students had after the reading. Right, in terms of how to implement these concept tests or concept questions, I actually very much like the idea of having a range of different ways of answering these. Right, so the traditional method in the field is to use the clickers, and a primary advantage of that is that you can actually collect the responses, you can display them on the screen, and if you want to, you can use it for attendance or even grading, although I am generally not so excited about that. So from my standpoint, I actually very much like these flashcards because they're very cheap. I mean, I had them made 8 years ago, and they're still going strong. So the students don't have to buy anything. There's never a question of them forgetting their clicker and then coming to you in the beginning of the class. Also, you don't have to wrestle with any software to get something working. So I find low tech is often very nice. But even these flashcards I find are more complex than is needed for many of the questions that I like to ask, in the sense that if I'm going to be giving the students, say, 30 seconds or more to think about a problem before answering, then I'll use the flashcards. And those are the questions that it's very likely that we're going to want to go ahead and do the peer instruction, where the students will pair off and discuss afterwards. But in line with this basic idea that you should use it or lose it, right? That part of the goal of a lot of the active learning techniques is that we just want to give the students practice just using the material and applying it. And I think in some cases it really is a tricky concept, right? So the classic questions that you see for a lot of these concept tests they're real distractors, in the sense that you see these other answers and you are tempted to try to say the wrong thing. Whereas there are also, I think, just lower level activities that you just have to practice. All right, well, if the current is going here, where's the magnetic field going to be? And I think that's the kind of thing that you just want to have the students do over and over again. All right, so when I teach the freshman electricity and magnetism course, for example, we'll do verbal responses, like dozens and dozens of them in every session, where every time that I'm on the board and I'm about to draw the direction of the magnetic field, I will just say, is the magnetic field here, up, down, left, or right? And then I wait a few seconds. I say 3, 2, 1, and eventually it feels awkward for me. It feels awkward for them. But I would say that this is the situation where you have to do this many, many times in order to be comfortable with it. And so I like a lot of these short, simple questions that just keep people engaged, just give them practice, even with the lower level skills. And you can also see a nice thing here is that when the flashcards go up, you can just look out and you get a quick sense of the distribution of the cards. And based on the distribution here, I would say that if you have, say, more than 85% of the class getting it right, then I would typically not have the students pair off. I would just say that, a majority of the group is agreeing that it's going to be C, and I might ask someone why that is or whatnot. But then if it's more in the range of, say, 40 to 80% of the students getting it right, then I would have them pair off and go ahead and discuss it. If it's less than 40% have it right, then there's a real question of whether, it might be there's enough general confusion that you want to kind of guide the class a little bit more before having them discuss on their own. Let's see. Oh yeah, so just a few closing thoughts. Right, so for me, I very much enjoy incorporating these active learning kinds of approaches in the classroom, and that I think that a beautiful lecture is indeed a beautiful thing, but it's a beautiful thing in the way that a performance is a beautiful thing, right? That if you're let's say a tennis player, it's wonderful to watch a professional tennis player go and do their thing, right? Same thing if you want to go to the ballet, right? But if you want to learn to be, a ballerina, you don't just watch people do the ballet. You go and you try it yourself. And so I think that part of the goal of the active learning is to, in addition to having the students view an expert at the craft doing their thing, it's also just you want to get them doing it. And in the context of a classroom, it really generates a fun dynamic because there is much more back and forth. I'm very much a believer in the idea of just doing very kind of frequent practice of even these easier, what you might call the easier kind of problems, just because it just keeps people engaged and they just get comfortable doing the lower level things, so then they can apply them in more difficult situations. As was mentioned previously, I think that part of what is nice about a lot of these approaches is that it does provide this tight feedback between the student, the instructor, and the material, in the sense that the students get a better sense of where they are, the instructor gets a better sense of where the class is, and it's not always obvious. I mean, you can be surprised that how much confusion there is. You can be surprised at how well they know the material, and in either case, you want to adjust your strategy accordingly. And with that, we'll go on.